All right. So I have the distinct honor and privilege of introducing our keynote speaker now. And we got to have a little dinner last night with Angela and learn more about her work all across the United States and really internationally on disaster response and how we can lead in moments of crisis. And I told this story last night, but I think it's worth sharing here. We, as a staff of the Hill Country Alliance, got together first in February to start planning this event. And every year we say, we're going to plan early, we're going to set our agenda, we're going to get our speakers lined up, and inevitably come September 1, and we're still scrambling. But this year, when we got together in February, we were watching the news unfold in Los Angeles, the wildfires that were destroying huge swaths of homes and businesses. We had just recently kind of gotten past the news of Hurricane Helene's impacts on the communities of North Carolina. We know that this region is prone to both flood and drought and wildfire, and we thought this summit, perhaps more than ever, really needs to be about how we root ourselves in resilience and prepare for and respond to natural disaster. Little did we know when we got together then in February that we would be kind of coming on the heels of the July floods that gripped so many communities across the Hill Country. So we were introduced to Angela by a nonprofit organization that works in North Carolina, very similar to the Hill Country Alliance, bringing landowners, community members, policymakers together, and they pointed us in Angela's direction, saying, you've got someone right down the road from you in Houston that is doing incredible work, not just for the community of Houston as the Chief Resiliency Officer, but for communities like ours that are reeling from the impacts of this flood and hurricane event. So we are so honored and grateful that Angela is with us today. If you haven't seen in the back of the room where we have copies of our printed agenda and speaker bios, we have a little printout that is about a half a page big, that is wisdom from disasters. And just a few of the highlights, not to steal your thunder, Angela, but the very first one is, no one is coming. We must move at the speed of need. Don't wait, work. And from there, she goes into what it looks like to come together as a community, to step up as individuals, to lead in times of crisis. So it is my absolute honor to welcome Angela to the stage. Please join me in thanking her.
That's very gracious.
Thank you for being
Thank
here.
you. Thank you.
Here's your clicker. You should just be able to point it at that, and it'll go forward.
There we go.
Oh,
Look at
you
us.
clicked it. There you go.
I meant to.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you. Now it doesn't work, Leah.
Try it. Oh, there you go.
Okay. Do I need to point it? So I was just asked if I've done this so much, I'm just never nervous anymore. And unfortunately, no. It doesn't seem to be that even the 1,000th time, I'm still anxious and thinking that before I come up, I forgot to retouch my lipstick. I hope that's not going to interfere with my message. I would have just advanced forgiveness on that front. So this is a photograph of a piece of the Berlin Wall, and it's a painting of that depicts the sensation that Germans were experiencing when over 1 million Syrians were pouring into Germany after the fall of Syria. And it's indicative, I know you said this worked, baby, but see, it's not the lipstick problem, it's always the clicker. Shall I just, shall I use the arrows?
Yeah,
oh, marvelous.
That might work. Okay.
So as Syrians are pouring into Germany, cities all over Germany are starting to think about how do we make these people welcome. Now, this occurrence is happening everywhere all the time now. So we are essentially in an era of upheaval. And this is a time in which worldwide, some 122 million people have been forcibly displaced, war or weather. We are vulnerable creatures, and we are on a common journey. We have done everything we could think of to engineer our way, to orchestrate our way, to extract our way, to buy our way past risk and vulnerability. But in the small print, in the terms and conditions of being alive on Earth, is all hell could break loose at any moment. Now, if you're a Texan, you know this, you understand it really well. And it's the embrace, it's what I'm inviting you to do today is embrace that vulnerability and come to understand and appreciate that you're all here because you made it, because somebody before you made it through the fires, the floods, the plagues, the pandemics, the unrest and the wars. You're here today because somebody knew how to do that. You carry within you that ability to be both great stewards of a place and to also understand its risks and its vulnerabilities. So I reference disaster. Disasters can be, they can be a lot of different things. Sometimes we experience an individual disaster, some catastrophic event that wrecks our lives, causes us to have to rethink everything and begin again. Sometimes it happens at a community level, far harder then, because most of us, in order to be resilient, need to look around and see a reflection of ourselves, be reminded of who we are and what we're good at. And when our entire community is gone, we miss those markers. We miss those benign, friendly mirrors of ourselves. And sometimes it can happen to whole countries. So when a disaster, a true disaster happens, the most significant and telling part of it is that it reveals the true value, the significance of what has been lost. And there will always be in your mind a before and after. In my mind, there will always be a before Katrina and an after Katrina. What I knew before Katrina, what I came to understand after. For all of you, July 4th will be that. A 10-year-old girl who was at Mystic, who survived, shared that she didn't really know if she wanted to be known as a survivor. And what I told her was, you get to choose what this means to you, and you get to name what this experience means to you. And her father said, when will we get back to normal? And so I have to deliver the news that we do not look back for normal. We look forward for new and next, because that's where the answers really lie. And it's a hard message to deliver. Most of us would not want a 10-year-old to know this. We would want them to wait till they're much older to experience this sensation of vulnerability. But also, there's the chance she has to do that within her own family, surrounded by people that love her, and that they together as a family now craft a story about what this means. So in a disaster, they're revelatory. Last night, someone wrote in a headline that I asked for, so many more people now come to understand and appreciate and value this region and what it offers and what it means to Texas and to all of you. There's opportunity in that. So the revelatory nature helps us see the true value of what's been threatened or lost. So you might think that this work I do of looking at long-term recovery with communities around the world is somehow depressing, but it's not. There's tremendous wisdom, and that wisdom falls into a set of stages and steps. Now, I have to tell you, because you're all a part of the Western world, plus you're Texans. So what I've observed is the minute you say stages, we get very cowboyish and decide that we can tackle them all at once and get through them very, very quickly. That is not how this works. These are really states of mind, conditions of being that follow catastrophic upheaval. And a reminder that's really important in the category of disasters are those big, dramatic, instantaneous disasters that everyone can see, but there's also the slow-moving, equally threatening disasters like drought that are difficult that don't have the dramatic photos that other kinds do. And then there's the failures of the levees. If there hadn't been a failure of the levees in New Orleans, you wouldn't remember the name of that hurricane. So we can have this combination of a slow-moving infrastructure catastrophe, and they can coincide with the more dramatic. And that's what you've all experienced, is sort of the slow-moving impact of a drought, which was reshaping your landscape, changing your lives already, and then the sudden dramatic and catastrophic flooding. So when we're looking at the aftermath, though, worldwide, war or weather, this is the familiar set of stages that come up again and again. Australian fires, they talked about these same things, and now we seem to, it's just gonna be that kind of day. Y'all saw the stages and you memorized them, so I'm going right on, because that's what we do. So within these stages, the very first one obviously is survival. When the most threatening things befall us, we are seeking sanctuary. We are seeking to be welcomed. We want our feet on solid ground. And the communities that succeed in the recovery process, that go on to bring not only meaning but recovery to situations are those that can stand up quickly, a kind of welcome. It's incredibly important, the language we use, because if a child doesn't want to be called a survivor, maybe no one else does either. And maybe it's really important that we use the language that matters most to people. Second is chaos and collisions, because immediately after, we're all trying to figure out how to navigate the systems that we have been told will be there for us. We've been told that you're going to go to this federal agency and that state agency and this nonprofit and that source of help. And now you're navigating all kinds of bureaucracies and all kinds of rules and regulations when you're in a highly charged and emotional and scared to death state. This is a very difficult stage where all our beliefs about how things work or how they should collide with how they actually do. Great deal of anger and frustration comes. And then limbo. I didn't really understand that state at first, because as we worked with people over the years whose lives were being upended, we observed that there would just be a period of time when you just couldn't get them to respond. And that lull, that moment, those moments when you're seeing no activity, you're seeing communities that just can't, and this is for both slow-moving and sudden and dramatic. You see people who've just been there for a real long time, and then suddenly they're not. And the work that's happening there is the internal reconciliation. I'm trying to reconcile what I thought was happening with what is. As one person described it, it's when everything that was normally easy becomes hard, and everything that was hard suddenly becomes impossible. So a whole reset of expectations. What is possible here, now? And then resignation and acceptance are exactly as you think they might be. Reckoning is an interesting stage because it comes at about a year. So you can generally imagine that a year from now, as anniversaries start being observed, people will have a great deal of emotion around that. And there's some specific things I'll share with you that can be done at that stage. And then the build anew part is when it gets to the opportunity. None of us would wish a disaster on any community, but the chance to rethink and to repurpose and to rebuild in a new way, it exists, and it is an opportunity. Finally, we want everyone to be home again. So no one is coming. Now, that's not the message of despair that it may sound like. It's not about no one ever going to come. It's about those that don't wait work. The no one's coming is the general mismatch between the avalanche of help and support you get when you can't use it versus all that you need a year from now when you really could. And as people would seek me out and say, what shall we do for the Hill Country? Mark the anniversary on your calendar and remember, in a year they will need you. Show up then. So that mismatch is as leaders, that's the hardest thing you manage, is to get the attention and the resources and the opportunities matched up over the long haul. Whatever you're recreating, whatever you're rebooting, whatever you're tending or nurturing in the ongoing work that you're doing here with the Alliance, it's the same challenge, is matching those things together. So in Survival and Sanctuary, I spoke, when we welcomed New Orleanians, there were people that used the wrong language, and it was hurtful. So when we stood up the shelter at NRG, which I was given like six hours to stand up a shelter for 10,000 people. We did accomplish that, and then I got a call and said, oh, and it should be animal friendly. And I'm like, well, could we just wave at them as they go by? Because like, don't hate me, but I'm not an animal person, So, but no, we checked in dogs, cats, gerbils, snakes, etc., and then also stored 357 guns, because people, when they're scared, bring their weapon to a shelter. So we didn't think that was conducive to harmonious sheltering. But we called people neighbors and guests and nothing else. So language really matters, particularly as you begin to tell the story of what's happened in the Hill Country and how you're going on together. How people want to be referred to is the language we want to use, and it needs to be the most inclusive language we can find. When we create any form of us and them, it sends a message. It's isolating and it's scary for the people who've gone through tough times. So we try to treat them as if we were checking them into hotels, and we were carting their belongings on the carts normally that hauled chairs around the place. We were inventive. So in the chaos and collision state, you've come up, as you might hear, with some expectations about what you might expect from the legislature, what the federal government may or may not do, what ordinances may or may not be available within reach. And then your expectations, your work, your hopes collide with that. That's where you've got a whole outpouring of interest. You've got a tremendous amount of support, but there's no match at all between what's possible and what's needed in the moment. And there are several times when I was speaking with Katherine when she spoke very wisely about the juxtapositions, the potential conflicts that exist between the now and the next, between these kinds of areas and those kinds of areas, between what you might do small and incrementally and what you might do broadly. And this is a stage where you have to hold on to both ends of things because it's not quite working. And to remember always, reality is on the ground, not in the headlines. The greatest disservice we do to people who are navigating catastrophic events or unthinkable situations is that we tell their story in a way they never would. And it hurts and it's harmful. It is very difficult to be working in a dedicated way, as many of you are, on behalf of this region, and have someone else write a headline for you that is completely at odds with how you're living it and experiencing. Do not pay attention to that. Stay close to the ground. That's where reality is. That's also where outpouring of help comes from. Just remember that in every disaster that, take this away, I've responded to for 20 years, the part of the disaster that got out of control and unmanageable was the number of people that wanted to help. As we anticipate going forward, assume that this is who we are. Assume this is who we are. That the potential to support what you're doing exists, and that connecting with people in a way that puts your cause front and center, bringing them to the table will work. Because this is what we do without a plan, a playbook, a dictate of any kind. We show up to help. We show up to help and make a plan for harnessing that over the long haul, because it exists. That potential exists all the time. And this is my favorite, because I'm Cajun. Allow everything. Allow everything. If it's not destructive, allow it. Because there are so many different ways that we will need to express our longings and our frustrations. And, New Orleans, So I kind of lived in two minds. One, because New Orleans, a place built, I think you'd agree, for living, for celebrating, for eating, for, the important stuff in life. And then I live in Houston, a place that, if you ever needed a picture of what hard work and ambition will get you, that's what you got in Houston. It's a city built for work. That's what we do. We go to breakfast, it's work. We go to work, and then we go to lunch, and it's work. And then we have a dinner that's work. And so, thank God for New Orleans. But to reignite, whenever you face unthinkable situations, to nurture and foster artistic expression, to encourage music, to get the artists back and get them up again and get them talking and get them helping. This is vital. And this particular picture, this was a project that we did in a camp in Germany that's a balloon shelter. There were no shared languages. There was German, Urdu, Arabic, and a couple of other languages amongst this large group of kids. And this person leading it was able to create this entire mural using spray. I thought that was brave in and of itself. But when we bring people together in this way, it creates a sense of belonging that transcends whatever differences we might have. I did so much work in Houston and Gulfton area where literally everyone in the world, it's the arrival neighborhood for the region. So we would be conducting meetings in 8 languages. And then we'd break them up because it's very difficult to have translation going on all the time. We would break up the meeting with little performances from the children. And it just meant that every parent in there got to be proud all the time. This is the way we both solidify our commitment to one another and then celebrate who we are together. So when you fall into limbo, if maybe it's personal, I got to that place myself. I had worked so long on so many things, and at one point I drove up to give, I don't know, 2 nonprofit leaders, you will understand, the 9 millionth enthusiastic pitch for our work to the, please God help us donor. And I just almost couldn't get out of the car. It was this whole weight of what you're trying to do against the difficulty of doing it. And that weight falls on us. And when it does, when you see yourself and you see others, they look like they just can't move. The woman in New Orleans told me she recognized that stage when she and her husband had gotten to the place. In New Orleans, people would mow the grass in front to let everyone know they were coming back. And they got to the place where they were so tired, they just mowed the grass between the sidewalk and the curb. She said, I felt like we just slept for 2 months. And that exhaustion is what many people who are trying to work on recovery, they're trying to go on with their regular responsibilities and then trying to invest in recovery. This is where they're going to be at some point, and possibly right about now, because the full weight of what the undertaking is now clear. So respect that and know that the work is then internal. This actually, I know, sorry for the fish, but all these animal loving people. But this was my brother's backyard after Ike, and Ike brought a lot of water in. And when he called me, he said, Angela, I got bad news and good news. The bad news, I got a couple of fish stuck in my fence, but the good news is one of them's a keeper. So, we Cajuns like to look at the upside. So that's the limbo stage. You're a fish out of water. You're in Buncombe County. Every minute I spent there, I was spending with a leader in government or philanthropy or the private sector who had a job and a whole other job they had never done before. And nobody said, oh, by the way, forget about the job you regularly have. We'll take care of that. You just go do this. They don't have that. So this is an enormously stressful period. And I think that feeling of being in limbo can be individual, but it can be whole communities suspended for such a long time. When I was working in Buncombe, we saw that Asheville, everybody felt they knew Asheville or understood it, its importance, much like you have cities within the hill country, people feel they understand, they've been to, and they see their importance, and then other places not so well known. And you heard some of the painful outcry of those communities that felt like they weren't on anyone's map. This happened also in Buncombe County. And that sense of invisibility and being just stuck in limbo because you actually don't know what's going on and you don't know what the next steps are because there's no one there to tell you. So we want to caution against that. This happened also in Australia. One of the hottest fires that ever burned on Earth was the King Lake fire. The Black Saturday fires in Australia were a massive turning point for Australians in terms of their preparations for disasters. And they face the same thing that you face in hill country, that these individuals who are the volunteer force, and they have a massive volunteer force in Australia because they have to. They're simply too sparsely populated to do it on a municipal level. These people live there. They tried to protect their own community, were called to a different community and had to fight that fire while their own community burned. And then because they are also first responders in every sense of the word, they had to retrieve the bodies. So we have to be mindful of what it's like to face this kind of unthinkable horror and what that does to people and how much they need us to move toward them. I've always said when people ask me, how can you listen to this and the details, I say, they lived it. At least I can listen. And if all you can do is put yourself next to someone who's got a scary story to tell and listen, you will have done them a service. When I was there, you know what they wanted to know about? They wanted to know about Katrina. I couldn't figure out why. And it was because they told me they felt like maybe the people in New Orleans knew what it was like to have endured this unthinkable situation. And so we brought a group of Australians to New Orleans, and we had a really good time. We taught those Australians a thing or two, and they taught us a thing or two as well. People want to know. They don't want to feel that their experience has placed them out so far outside of the normal that you don't want to talk to them. Move closer, not further away, always. On resignation and acceptance, I'm just going to turn to this slide. So in Galveston, Galveston no business in Galveston after I still had a sign, because all those signs were in Houston, because I could just wash the whole thing up. And so this one bar, they hand-lettered a sign, and it says, Hard Times and Misery Saloon. And, you know, I'm always saying to leaders, you know, you don't move into the Hard Times and Misery Saloon. And get up on a bar stool and tell your sad story about how grossly unfair the Texas State Legislature has been to you, or how cruelly the federal government has disrupted your plans for saving the world, as they did mine. And so, you know, we have to maintain ourselves in a state of willingness to do the work in front of us, even if the goalposts move and things change. There's a measure of sort of radical acceptance that's necessary to sustain yourself in long-term work. And look, there is no such thing as a small effort. Every small effort matters, but there's also no such thing as anything really significant that doesn't take a few years. And most of what I heard this morning is a 5 to 10 to 30-year agenda for preserving a treasure. So sustaining yourself means, you know, well, you can take some Cajun advice. You don't have to know the whole story, but at one point in the 1700s, you know, the King of England got pissed off and decided to throw all the French folk that I descend from who were in Acadia out. Well, 250 years later, all the Cajuns go for a big reunion up in Acadia, and they think maybe 250 years would be a good time to ask for an apology for that cruel deportation. And of course, the British Crown wasn't inclined to give it. So a man from Opelousas, y'all may know where that is. It's heart of Cajun. He got up and he said, why don't we just forgive him anyway and go dancing? In order to preserve yourself in any meaningful work, there's an art to forgive them anyway. And it's about the preservation of your dedication, your commitment, your energy to the cause. And that is absolutely necessary. I heartily recommend dancing. I mean, it's hard to be miserable and mad at anybody while you're dancing, right? You know this. Okay. So when Syrians were resettling in Germany, this woman says to me, it's very hard because on the one hand, we're very grateful. We now have a home. Took us years to get here, but now I walk into the home that I have here and I see the home I lost. And I think when we work with people in any capacity as far as helping, if we're expecting gratitude, we have to understand that grief comes with it. They walk through the same door. They live side by side in our hearts. You know this because all of you, as grateful as you are to live in this beautiful place, to be its stewards, to take care of it, you also see what gets lost. And so there's a measure of grief anytime we dedicate ourselves to a place or a purpose. And if you let them live side by side and don't force yourself into a false gratitude that denies the losses or sets aside the setbacks, you can stay in this a long time. And especially when you're helping someone, understand that the only thing you may see is grief. You may not see the gratitude because they go together. So this is a harder one to talk about because I've seen this ritualized all over the world in various ways. And it's whether it's a place or people or a business or an institution, we can mourn it. And we can authentically mourn it by celebrating what it meant to us, by acknowledging it, by letting it go, by having an opportunity to express the way we feel about it and what it meant. And that's not what we usually do. Now, we may do that with people. We have rituals around the loss of an individual, but communities have rituals now in many places around the loss of place itself. The fact that we're facing disasters now that completely reshape our landscape. They take away the places we valued, where we fell in love, where we came together, where we celebrated, the places that made us feel whole and made us a community. And when we allow people to mourn that, then what gets built after is more authentic. If we do not, if we say to people, as we do all the time, get over it, done and dusted, move on, without acknowledgement, then the commitment they make the next time is going to be less because it's going to be reduced by the pain they're still carrying they never got to express. It is all right to mourn places. It's all right. You know, I got really pissed off and sad because I had 5 very beautiful big citrus trees that fed the whole neighborhood and a shelter in Houston. And Yuri took them, and I was so mad and so angry and so sad over my trees. It was so small compared to what many people here have faced. But those losses, it's okay to mourn them, and it's all right to ritualize that together so that then you can move on. Because in the acknowledgement of what was lost, you see the seed of what you want to create. So New Orleans, again, you know, does that pretty good because we do that sad, slow march to the cemetery. And then we do that wild, raucous march out with dancing, just a reminder. I'm going to move on to reckoning because I want to get to the place where I can get some responses. In reckoning, you're actually doing an assessment, which is good leaders should be doing this all the time. What you want in every instance is to look around you and say, who's here? What have they got to work with? And it's a strength-based assessment of where you are and what's possible going forward. Strength-based is vital. You know, we're prone to criticize and demonize and get frustrated with one another, and that's normal too. But we build out of what we collectively can do well together. So the best preparation for disaster is to know, to know all of your fellow leaders in the region, the people who are sitting atop the institutions that will be vital, to have their cell numbers. I think Elizabeth Dole famously said, the time to make friends is not 2 a.m. when the hurricane's in the Gulf. And now that you've solidified, you've had a reason to come together. Knowing and understanding what you're each capable of means that you can orchestrate response and action based on that. We're not making assumptions here. We're really trying to understand what we uniquely bring to the table so we can activate it in the interest. The being written off, as I said at the beginning, the small communities that feel left out, the individuals that mourn alone, the communities that have no one to help them give voice to what was lost. These are the pockets of rage and despair. These are the pockets of disenchantment. And so one of our jobs as a leader is to constantly look over the landscape and say, have we got everybody? When I say hill country, do we have everybody? Have we given everyone an invitation? Have we set the table for everyone who could potentially help or would benefit from being here? All over the world, we're seeing what happens, the fallout from isolation. And being written off there must be something just inherent in every human being that rejects that, because our reaction to it is one of these two things, and it's costly. So, and I love to remember this. When someone gripes at me, my experience at the city was great. I used to be very self-critical, but for 18 months I'm working in city government, and some 3 million people and the Houston Chronicle were full-time criticizing. So I no longer had to do that. They were taking care of that part. It was like, we weren't getting anything right, headline after headline. So, but when people are complaining, when they're outraging, when they're beneath every grievance is a hoped for, longed for, better future. The response is not to argue with their view of the world. It's to say, what would this look like if it worked for you? What would this look like if it worked for all of us? Because that's what they're comparing the reality to, and that's where the frustration is coming from. So that opening question, to open the door to say, what is it you're imagining? Because the pain comes from what they're imagining versus what they're experiencing. I have so many examples of the do what you can with what you have, where you are, all over the world. We think we need engineering studies and procurement processes. So all over the world, people improvise their way to solutions. I saw in Puerto Rico people who, for almost a year in small communities, so-called remote communities, actually took less time to get to some of those than it does to get across Houston at rush hour. But in so-called remote communities without power for up to a year, what they learned and what they came together to do and what they improvised was valid. So we improvise, and then we study the improvisations, because in many cases, they point us toward what we could be doing all of the time, everywhere. They also, if you put a power supply in your community and you put a cistern and a water treatment capacity in your community, then the rest may go out, but your community exists as a haven, and it's a workable place no matter what happens. And the more we disconnect, we have been accustomed to think that large is secure and big is better, especially in Texas. But also what we learn from disasters is that small is secure and together is better. So try to remember that. So when we look at building anew, I have to mention feral hogs. Because I talked about the thousands of people that pour in and show up to help, right? Like, you'd be one of them. You would all figure out something you could do, try to help. But there's also people that go, this is a chance to make a buck. These people have no idea what they're doing. I'm going to roll in, crap all over everything, fatten up, and roll out again. Now, I mention them because they're the exception. But they do. The predators arrive at some point when you're vulnerable and you're hurting and you don't know what to do. And when we offer assistance to communities, some of the best assistance we can provide is to help them sort through who to work with, so the feral hogs don't win. And you're going to be fighting feral hogs, literally and figuratively, I think, for quite some time. When I was in Rolling Fork, I saw this sign, "Do not scrap," and a tornado, in case you didn't know, just flattened in that small town. And this was a town that people just loved. And it was Frances that told me all about every single ritual they had and why it was so important and what kinds of music was birthed there and that they celebrated there. And the "Do not scrap" message really reminded me of this important job that we all have as leaders. Our first task, take off our shoes, for the place is holy. So many times as helpers, we roll in. I mean, I've seen it everywhere in the world. We just roll in, we know better. I've had people tell me, "I don't understand. We came with a plan and they didn't want it." It's like, well, because it wasn't theirs and you're not from there and this ain't your community. And in this case, that's what was said so beautifully last night is that you are a part of this. This is your community. This is your place. But this gentle walking into places not our own and treating what's there as valid. We don't scrap what we don't own, and we let others tell us what's going to be valuable. How's this working for y'all? Are you good? I'm just checking. So I hope that breakfast taco is lasting, because we're winding down up here, but I know you might be hungry. Am I doing all right here, Kath? The boss says I'm all right. This one is the hardest. Our frustrations, our genuine, deep frustrations have led us to demonize one another across all manner of labels and categories. And yet, Texas, uniquely in its history, has the longest record of unholy alliances probably of any state in the country. You know, I hate you 9 out of 10 ways, but that 10th thing, we're going to do that together. This has been how we got things done in Texas. And there's another form of that I really tell you has to happen. This three-legged stool is the only way anything you accomplish sticks. Because when you've got a two-legged stool, it will fall over, and there's no such thing as a one-legged going anywhere. So this alliance, the philanthropic sector has this freedom and elasticity. We have more room to maneuver when we're leading in the philanthropic sector because we have private money, which still can just be more flexible. In the public sector, it's bound, and all of the elected officials, I just congratulate you, because you listen all day to people ask you to do things you don't have the power to do that can't be accomplished in your term of office, for which there are zero resources. And you do that and still treat us with some degree of grace and kindness. Thank you for that. But understanding how the public sector works and thinks and what's possible and tailoring our demands and requests of the people who lead in that sector is the job of the other two sectors. We need to come right. In the private sector, you know, somebody asked me last night, you know, like developers in Houston. I'm like, well, you know, they pretty much just win, you know. However, that doesn't mean we give up on them because they have a relatively disproportionate power. It means you work individually, one at a time, project by project, to do what you can with what you have where you are. Because there is no other way. There is no other way. If there was some way not to get some lasting shift, just talking to the people that are easy to talk to, that understand us and care about what we care about, it'd be done. So this three-legged stool, as these long-term recovery committees are being formed, the FEMA-required long-term recovery group, everybody's at the table and all three sectors have to be there. So I just keep that stool in mind, and when you look around the room, if you don't have representatives from all, just go back and look at your invitation list and rework it. There is enough to go around. When working in Germany, we do not have a scarcity problem. We have a distribution problem. And all of you here are here in some way because you want access and distribution and the enjoyment of a place to be shared in a way that makes it sustainable. So that's a big undertaking, and we have that undertaking everywhere. How do we behave as if there's enough to go around and keep working toward the solutions until we come up with the answers that are like that, that reflect that belief? In this instance, they were able in Germany not only to supply every person, all 975,000 people who came, with everything their households needed, but so much was donated that they then shipped it by truck to camps throughout the Middle East and the frontline states. We have enough. We have enough stuff. We have enough resources. We have a distribution problem, not a scarcity problem. And it's really important to act that way as leaders, because if we make things zero-sum games, what that triggers in all of us is that we have to fight, not solve problems together, fight with one another. So I want to introduce a topic, a concept in Texas that we really need to look at. So Australia has a lot of regulations. They like regulations. They're like, Australia is Texas, but civilized. That's same. They're great, but just civilized, they don't let money in politics, and campaigns are a month long. And if you don't supply the government, you all have to go be elected again. Oh, you pass a budget pretty quick under those. So they got really smart rules. And one of the things they took a look at is, because they were so concerned with sustainability and getting it right on resources, building there is very hard and expensive and take a long time. And they began looking at the number of people like myself that are overhoused, grown kids, the house is there, it's room for me and 5 other people. And they said, well, what if we just offered people incentives to create additional space in their house? We're doing the opposite when we could be doing that. And the overhoused, we're also overlanded. I mean, I have a huge lot, and while I do like my trees, I went ahead and planted some more. Yeah, but this is, we need to be looking at what we have and expanding its uses and allowing for more in places, more accommodation rather than more building. So I'm going to wrap up here with the words that y'all gave me yesterday. And the process that you're in now is to think about whenever disasters happen, it's like, what are we going to rebuild? What are we going to recreate? And the implies a look backwards and creates an expectation that not only, I always make fun of Galveston, because Galveston's always trying to recreate a past that only exists in postcards and memories. It was never like that, but they kind of think it was. And after every storm, they try to go back to that thing that didn't happen in the first place. But, because everybody went to Galveston and had a good time. They just wanted to look like that one postcard. So when we start to anything, it creates an expectation and a great deal of tension. And, the invitation is not to it's to look ahead and say, now what is possible? And what would it look like if it worked for everyone? What are the strengths and how do we improvise out of them? This is the creative act. So last night, this is how some of your folks in this room foresaw what could happen in this region, and what they envision, what they hope for, or what has happened. I'll scroll slowly and let you read them.
Can you go back? One more? There you go.
Thank you to this person who took the assignment very seriously. I appreciate you. I like to hear what we're doing in this is embracing the tensions we know exist, not trying to run past them, override them, or ignore them. For anyone who's worked with indigenous communities, this is the standard. I worked with this lovely woman that had created a financial institution that really allowed people on native lands to access credit. And I said, well, how did you decide what the protocols were going to be? And she said, I thought, what would they thank me for 9 generations from now? And I think that's a very different standard than most of us bring to the table to a project or an initiative. What would they thank me for 9 generations from now? Come on down to Houston, not in hurricane season. We'll take good care of you. This one embraces the tension between the now and the years from now, because people will often create a sort of binary around those. And this is the both and answer, and it's beautiful. And these are my credits. All the people that taught me all these wonderful lessons from all over the world. And now I'll be able to add you all there too. Thank you so much for having me. Awesome. Thank you. Oh. I definitely want y'all to come to Houston. Thank you so much. It was a privilege, a real privilege. Oh, yes, thank you. Yes. So, boss.
Yeah, I'm going to go
Did I
ahead
do a good job?
and say we've got time for questions. We'll let Angela get a drink of water, and I'd love to hear any questions from the audience. We've got about 10 minutes.
Or just something that made sense to you that you'll share, just any. I mean, some of you are lovely audience members. You're kind enough to nod and smile. Thank you. But anything on your mind?
I just was going to ask you to go back to the slide that lists the stages of recovery that was towards the beginning.
I have a question. What was your first disaster?
Allison?
Yeah.
Allison? You know, Allison just dumped, like, I don't know, 20-something inches of, and $8 billion worth of damage in Houston. It wasn't even a hurricane. So I remember getting this like super bitchy text from, forgot my manners, from this person I was supposed to meet with in DC. And she's like, well, why aren't you here? I'm like, well, because we're like underwater. And the rest of the world didn't even know about it, but that's where it started. But I grew up on the Gulf Coast, and as a Cajun person, you know this about us. Well, when there's a hurricane, this is how we prepare in Beaumont. We make a huge pot of gumbo, and then all the relatives from even lower lying places would come to our house, And my dad's cousin would bring his accordion, and he would play music, and we would watch the wind blow, and the water would come in, and the water would go out, and we'd go on with our lives. And as we know now, the water comes in and in and in. Yeah, and it's rising, right? So, I learned a lot from Allison. I learned seniors won't tell you that their house is messed up because they think you'll make them move. And now I can relate to that. So, yeah. Yes?
You mentioned for communities going through disaster to be really mindful when using whether it's restore, rebuild, to ensure that we're also looking forward and not just trying to recreate the past and what that means for a community and the individuals who are moving through grief. Are there any words that we should be mindful of that could maybe just provide hope in a time?
I think it's when you think, a question, there's a discipline, a method of inquiry called appreciative inquiry, and Case Western kind of birthed this in the 70s, extremely useful in disasters. And it can be misunderstood as looking at the positive. Please don't do that to people. But one question that honors grief but allows people to think with you, and they'll tell you if they're ready. If they're still telling you what it was like to go through it, it's not time. Just listen. But they'll tell you when they're ready because they'll start talking about now what. And a question is, when you think about what it was like, what's the most precious part of it that you want to preserve? So it doesn't invite you to go and recreate everything right down to the last brick, because that's not possible. But the invitation is to look at what was most precious, and how would you preserve that, or how would you acknowledge that? What would we build that would make a statement about that? Because it isn't always the same thing that we had. So I think and then I think this is an anathema to Texans. And this is what we're going to really struggle. When I say Australia is 25 years ahead of us, it's because they use the word that God forbid we should ever retreat. We can't go back there. It won't work anymore. So that's the one dreaded retreat. But sometimes people are ready to abandon a place, and you want to allow them to also say that. I'm not going to be here, but here's what I want to take with me. So it's allowing them, and it's just like the 10-year-old girl, what is your name for what happened to you? What is the story? One of the ways that helps me and many leaders I know move past things, what is it that you learn from this you would want others to know? That takes us just enough outside of our own suffering for it to get some meaning that on behalf of others, and that's helpful. I have some other list of questions that are of that nature.
We got a question over there. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom.
Oh, okay.
Wait. Sorry, we've got a microphone over there first, and then we will come to you, and I know we've got one more over here. Sorry.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Have you ever considered writing a book?
Oh.
Hi.
Oh.
Or is it in the works?
I'd rather stand up a shelter for 10,000 people. So I've written a lot, and I got an agent, but let me tell you, writing is an alone thing, and I like this. I like this a lot.
Noted.
Yeah.
Thank you.
A lot of this. To be in rooms with people that deeply care about one another and place, it just doesn't get better than that. So, and really, would you read it? Young people tell me people don't actually read books anymore. They just hand them out like business cards and skim them. Is that? I don't know. Anyway. Audio. Yeah. I think that's what this is. Did you record it? There you go. You got it. You got your book. Because at this age, I need to have time for dancing. Okay. What else? What else can I help you with?
I just want to make a quick comment. I grew up in Galveston, and
Yeah.
I'm going to do a little defense to them right now.
Darn it! I shouldn't have
Darn.
made fun of Galveston today.
That's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
That's all right. When I went through, one of the things that I used to love when I would go back to Galveston was driving down Broadway and seeing all the trees. You know, they had the most magnificent oak trees.
They
and
did.
These trees were everywhere in Galveston. Well, they lost them all.
Yeah.
And I mean, I literally cried
Yeah.
driving through Galveston. And then I went back about 6 or 8 months later, and all these artists had come in from all
Yes.
over, and they took the trees and they made them into
Yeah.
pieces of art. And so that's not Galveston looking back.
Yes.
That's Galveston figuring out how to take a resource that was important to all of us and make it beautiful. And I just had
You're
to say that
so
about
right,
Galveston.
and that's so good. And I'm sorry I teased about Galveston. I remember, Lyda Ann Thomas and I were good buds, and I don't know if y'all kind of remember Ike, but there was Lyda Ann just fighting for Galveston, and she cried over those trees too, and it's all right to cry about trees, and it's all right to cry about the loss of things that anchor us in a place, and
Angela, thank you so
Yeah.
much for that, just all that wisdom and the just beautiful medicine for us. Thank you. We've been working to protect this beautiful spring called Jacob's Well that's flowed for probably millions of years. And 30 years ago, we saw it starting to decline, the flows lessen. And we had this big corporation move in. And I know in America, we say, corporations are people. But if they're people,
Yeah.
they're really maybe psychotic
They're
people.
not-
or
they're not- they're not the best of us.
Not the best people.
Yeah.
But there are people in those corporations.
Yeah.
And to what you said,
Yes.
I spent, and they're overpumping the aquifer, and they've dried up the spring in the last 4 years. We can't swim there. It's now a public place. But we reached out to those individuals and met with the president, the CEO, and we talked about our problems, and we laid out plans for how to solve them. And then they lurch off and they do things that they aren't supposed to, and then they sue the local district, and they won't comply, and they take us to federal court. And I'm trying to find that compassion. They go, okay, these are people in here, but they're beholden to the shareholders, not the local stakeholders.
Right.
And they're willing to, basically bankrupt our local authorities, and they're willing to just dry up this sacred spring that's the core of our economy in our valley, and it's the lifeblood of our community. How do we get beyond this where the money is more important than the place, and their action to earn more is greater than the community's desire to preserve this sacred place.
So, first of all, just thank you, but everything about that story is the shape of the story we're all fighting in one way or another. How do we get past the need of the oil companies to dredge into the Mississippi so that we create a highway for hurricanes? How do we get past the destruction along the port in Houston? So the first thing is, when a company's behaving like a feral hog, it's not you're not gonna, I always say, if you treat a feral hog like a pet pig, you get eaten. So you have to, we can't be naive. We have to bring some power to the table. We're not demonizing the people in the entity, but we are going to have to stand up to power. That's why this is so important. You individually going and begging, which I'm always willing to beg. Sometimes it works. But you individually begging them to be decent and consider the whole is not going to work. But an army of people saying, these are the things that we value, and we're going to use all of the tools at our disposal to make this harder and harder and harder for you. And that's all you've got. Because money is a huge draw, and we live in, I know y'all know this already, but it's called capitalism. That's what we got, I mean, that's the name of the system we're in, and it does this. And it isn't until that goes full circle and bites that company in the butt do they stop. And it takes a long time, and in the meantime, we witness the loss of things precious to us. Irretrievable losses. And I would say on the human side, for people who valued that, for the people who fell in love there, who had a good time there, who remember something important there, that a ritual around that place is important. Yeah.
Would everyone please join me in thanking Angela?
That was so much fun. Thank you. Thank you so much.